But in a situation where you find that a look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
I have said that.
Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on Daybreak on Trust TV. We'll go straight right now to check out the headlines, and we'll start with the Daily Trust newspaper. It carries this major headline on the front page: how 23 remaining abducted Kaduna train passengers were released. And it comes with riders here, families excited, how negotiators seal deal, and NRC to unveil plan on train service resumption. Those details can be found on page 4. Going down towards the bottom of the front page there, Senate approves 3.6 trillion naira petrol subsidy, 8.4 trillion naira borrowing plan for 2023. Details on page 19. At the bottom there is a belt, resolve your dispute in 24 hours. Appeal court tells federal government and ASU. Man remanded for defiling 2 minors in wife's lesson class. And Geregu emerges first power firm on NGX, lists 2.5 billion naira shares. And of course, the pictorial right there is of the released victims and some of the negotiators that was taken yesterday. Towards the top of the front page, World Teachers Day, 2 years after federal government yet to implement teachers' new salary package. Details of that can be found on page 3. And switching to politics now, APC crisis, Governors National Working Committee meet, failed to agree on campaign kickoff. And more flood to hit Kogi, Kebbi, Kaduna, Taraba, Lagos, others in 24 hours. That's some sad news there. Well, details of that are on page 7. So for these and more stories, check out the Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
All right, with that, we'll move on to Punch newspaper. And the lead story here talks about INEC governorship list. And, it says litigation kicks 14 APC, PDP, LP candidates out. We have writers that says parties face court cases in Ebonyi, Akwa Ibom, Enugu, 6 others. Commission OK Sanwo-Olu, Abiodun, Makinde, 834 others. Senate confirms 19 recs. Atiku, Okowa, and Bauchi received defectors. All right, with that, just below the, the story there is the picture of the released passengers, the released 23 train hostages. As bandits have released them and families are rejoicing, and Nigeria is rejoicing as a whole. And then just below that story, Ebola deadlier than COVID-19, heightened surveillance warn virologists. Lagos church dogs stray, bites passerby to death. Customs intercept ammunition, others worth 600 million naira. At the top of the page, we have Senate approves 2023 expenditure, OK's $73 per barrel oil price. Adamu governors meet to adjust Tinubu's campaign list. We also have American-Danish scientists share 2022 Nobel Chemistry Prize. Teachers' Day, NUT seeks better deal, knocks governors. And then just beside the nameplates there, Dangote, Kogi fight over validity of land acquisition, and NGX lists Geregu Power investors make 10% gain. These are some of the stories on the Punch newspaper.
The next paper we're going to be looking at this morning is The Nation newspaper. It carries this headline. It goes politics. APC's National Working Committee, governors, PCC members unite for Tinubu. Riders here to say flag bearer returns today. Southeast APC women hold rally in Owerri, and Onaikon ruling party chose same faith ticket as winning strategy. Still on the front page of The Nation, Buhari promises to restore teachers' pride. Details of that can be found on page 25. How parties can substitute candidates by INEC. That story is still on the front page of The Nation. Towards the top of the front page there, above the nameplate, Lagos to riverine communities quit over flooding. That's on page 3. 23 remaining Abuja Kaduna train abductees freed. Details on page 28. And 3 scientists win Nobel Prize in chemistry. And switching back to politics, detractors of PDP will be disappointed, says IU. Talking about the economy now, Otedilas Geregu becomes first power firm to list shares on NGX. Firm gains 25 billion naira on first trading day. Army court-martials 68 officers, soldiers, and Hush Puppy faces 11 years in jail. Now, these are the major headlines on the front page of the Nation newspaper.
All right, with that, we'll move on to this day newspaper. And the lead story here says, Buhari, Nigerians owe our military debt of gratitude as remaining 23 trained victims are freed. Urges security agencies to sustain momentum. DHQ gives details of victims' rescue. How Mamu's arrest may have aided safe operation. All right, we also have just above that story. 12 days after unceremoniously leaving for London, Tinubu returns today. 2023, APC NWC governors fail to agree on campaign commencement date. We also have riders that says, we'll determine when our campaign will start, says Adamu. Release of campaign list by PCC unfortunate, Bagudu explains. At the top of the page, we have NNPCL, how vandalism, oil theft impacted 2021 financial results. And these are some of the stories on this day newspaper.
Next, we take a look at the Guardian newspaper, and it carries this headline on the front page. Regulation policy frustrates 14,120 megawatts hydropower. And the riders here that says $7.1 billion hydropower, a mirage as stakeholders kick against borrowing. Now, the nation's electricity emission worries experts amid energy transition. Buhari's electricity infrastructure expansion to serve Abuja for 50 years, says federal government. 1,465 megawatts transmission line, 870 megawatts transformers to be commissioned in December, says TCN boss. And going towards the bottom of the front page, talking politics now. Akwa Ibom APC has no governorship candidate for 2023 election, INEC declares. 7 workers allegedly shot as Kogi seals Dangote factory at Obajana. Federal government secures release of 23 remaining Kaduna train attack victims. And of course, Geregu Power firm lists on stock exchange. Towards the top of the front page there, below the nameplate, APC unsure of campaign flag off as Adamu insists on party supremacy over PCC. Details of that can be found on page 6. And appeal court to hear ASU's stay of execution suit today. Details of that on page 3. Now, these are the major headlines on the front page of the Guardian newspaper.
All right, with that, we move on to Nigerian Tribune newspaper. And at the top of the page, it talks about Geregu, first power company to list on stock exchange, gains 10% on first trading day. Also have appeal court panel asks federal government ASU to settle dispute out of court. Konwa directs members back to classroom as federal government promises to pay withheld salaries. And we have more stories here. Military rescues 23 remaining kidnapped Kaduna train victims on page 29. World Teachers Day. Federal government governors announce special rewards for teachers. Ogun wins Best Public School Teachers Awards in Abuja. You also have youths chase workers away as Kogi government seals off Dangote cement factory at Obajana. And the lead story here talks about the controversial list. Campaign Council aired, says APC governors. We are not in a hurry to kickstart campaign, says Adamu. We have more stories. PDP NWC to appeal court judgment on Ogun chapter. Oyetola appeals court ruling nullifying his candidacy for Osun election. 15 arrested. Governors imposes dusk to dawn curfew over anti-EFCC protests in Ughelli. These are some of the stories on Nigerian Tribune.
And next we'll take a look at the Blueprint newspaper, and it carries this major story on the front page. Adamu on Tinubu's lists, why APC can't commence campaign without governors. And riders here that says they are key to party's victory. A release campaign list will be sorted out, says Bagudu. And ACF please warn politicians against rigging and thuggery. Details of that can be found on page 5 and 6. Buhari to restore OML 46 to Bayelsa. That is another story on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper. And Kaduna train 30 days after Mahmoud's arrest, DHQ rescues remaining 23 abductees. Nation owes gratitude to military CDS Irabo. Federal Executive Council okays 2023 budget estimates for presentation to NAS on Friday. And towards the top of the front page there, we won't allow withdrawal, substitution of candidates, INEC warns. And goes with this rider, Senate confirms 19 Rex, NUPRA Executive Commissioner. Now, these are the major headlines on the front page of the Blueprint newspaper this morning. All right, and with that we wrap up the quick glance at the headlines. We'll come back for a more in-depth analysis of these headlines after this break. Do stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that a look at the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us on Daybreak this lovely morning on Trust TV. Well, we're going to go straight and look at a more in-depth analysis of the headlines that we just took a glance at before we went on that break. And of course, to help us do that right here in the studio, we have Nasir Lawal, the editor-in-chief of Dateline. Welcome.
Thank you.
As usual.
It's good to be here.
Yes, it's always nice to have you on the show. You're almost attaining co-anchor status. Yeah. All right. So the major story is the release of the remaining passengers of the remaining abducted passengers of the Kaduna Abuja train. It has been a long time coming. We've talked about this a lot of times, how there was no information regarding the negotiations, whether negotiations were even taking place. Is it welcome now that it has happened, or is it too late?
Well, you know, like they usually say, all is well that actually ends well. We are happy that the 63 abducted passengers have now been fully accounted for. It was not, you know, a nice experience actually in the first place for you to be held against your will for more than 6 months, you know. I think the families actually have a reason to celebrate. And I'm happy with what the secretary of the committee, that's the committee that was set up by the Chief of Defense Staff, General Irabo, coming out to say that actually this is like a collective effort. Nobody is trying to like claim credit over it. And now that they are going back to their families, I think the families deserve to be happy. And so many stories will actually now be told, because most of the things that we have been hearing actually have not come to pass. Like if you remember, the former negotiator, that's Tukur Mamu, at a point he said so many things, and we are glad that none of them actually happened. Like when he said one of the terrorist leaders was actually trying to, you know, forcefully marry one of the abducted passengers, and now that they are all back, I think it's we can celebrate that.
Okay, now one of the writers actually talks about the railway corporation, you know, getting ready or planning to resume service. Do you think it's too soon for them to start, you know, plans?
Well, it's actually not too soon. My problem with that is the fact that right now we are still talking about trying to secure the train corridor, because all the surveillance contracts they were talking about, I don't think that has happened. And you know, these are things that we actually collected money from China to be able to run it. And we have not been able to like keep servicing it, keep paying back the loan, because the trains are not operating. So I think it's not, probably it's not too soon for it to resume, because one, we need the money, and then we also need the services, especially with the condition of the Abuja-Kaduna highway at the moment. So many motorists are actually having a hard time applying that route. So I think it's high time that the government should actually restart the train operations.
Okay, well, while we're still on that, moving slightly away from that, a lot of people actually are saying that, okay, well, the government did well, that secured the release of the abducted passengers and the rest of it, but their job shouldn't end there, because these people have gone through a lot. What next for them? I mean, talking in terms of trauma and how they can be able to recover, therapy and all that, that the government still needs to do more for these people, not just bringing them back to their homes and their families. Do you think that is something that the government should look into?
Yeah, certainly, because, the fact that they were released in batches, and I don't think the ones that were actually released earlier underwent any rehabilitation. They just returned to their families and continued their lives. And honestly, that shouldn't be the case, because for you to be held against your will, unsure of your fate, and for you to be able to now regain your freedom, honestly, you need to undergo, certain forms of rehabilitation, so that you will know that what you actually went through is not like a normal thing, and that even the society identifies with you, put themselves in your shoes to be able to, so that you get back on your feet. But for the government to just, act as if nothing has happened, I think that's very unfortunate. So the government should find a way of reassuring not only the abducted train passengers, but even those who will now be using the services of security and so many other things.
All right, so let's move away from that story to politics. Now, most of the dailies today actually carried, the story of APC still, failing to agree on, campaign kickoff. And it's not just the APC, even the PDP is actually going through the same due to the internal crisis, within the parties. What's your take on this?
It's unfortunate that we are still talking about reconciliation, that's with regards to the two major political parties, the APC and the PDP. We are just like 6 months away from the presidential election, and then we are still talking about even agreeing on how to proceed with the campaigns. Then what happens to all the manifestos, things that you intend to do for the electorate and things like that. But, in politics, you keep having this crisis, from time to time, because you have like collection of interest, each trying to have like a way ahead of the other. So it's normal in politics to have all this crisis. But when the crisis begin to stop you from actually doing what you are supposed to do, then that's when it actually becomes a problem. So Nigerians will also, I think, put pressure on these parties so that they begin to tell us what actually they intend to do, so that based on what we know, we will be able to make our decisions when it's time to elect our leaders.
Because a lot of people are actually concerned right now that this does not augur well for us as a nation, because if these are the two behemoth political parties that we actually have, and what happens if they can't sort themselves out internally? What happens when they actually get, when the power comes to them, when they're actually running affairs of the nation? A lot of people actually believe that this is not a good sign of things to come, and really it's something should be done about it.
Well, in politics, this is actually the time for them to do all the struggles and what have you. Because by the time you have a president, then everything stops on his table. So you can't like continue to drag things with him once he is the president. So this is actually the time that they have to be able to raise all the objections that they have, so that they get carried along even before we get a president in the end. Because by the time you have a president, honestly, trying to confront him, comes with lots of risks. And our politicians, they are already used to what they call government subsidized lives. So many of them cannot do without patronage from the government. So nobody will want to be in the wrong books of the president. So they now use what they have or the time that they have to be able to get what they want.
Okay, so still on politics, how about, the final INEC list that actually came out, and you have INEC warning because, most parties are complaining, and INEC is actually warning that they will not allow withdrawal or substitution of candidates.
Yeah, it's good that INEC is now coming out to exert its independence to show that they will not allow the players to go contrary to the dictates of the law. I think that's a very good one. I don't know whether they will be able to sustain that anyway. But the political parties, they have had all the time in this world, to come out with their candidates, But they were unable to do that because of the struggles. Everybody wants to be the one on the ticket, and then you end up not doing what you are supposed to do. If you look at what is happening in some of the states, like in Akwa Ibom, they're already talking about the fact that APC has no governorship candidate, which is quite unfortunate. And then in other states, there are litigations, so you still don't know what will happen in the end. And even in Kaduna State, the name of the Labour Party candidate was not on the list. Probably there is some explanations to that. But at the moment, I think it's a setback to those who think they have head-on something that they can actually pursue to also have a go at the governorship slot in Kaduna State.
Before we leave that particular talk about the list and candidates and the rest of it, how do you think this will affect the aftermath of the elections? If you go into the elections with all these litigations and all these uncertainties surrounding the list of candidates, who's representing what, because we all know that the parties are on the ballot and then the candidates sort themselves out. So after the elections, party wins, then we come on start sorting out who was the candidate of the party at that particular point in time. Do you think that augurs well for at the post-election?
No, certainly it doesn't. If you look at what happened in a number of states, like in Zamfara, the APC actually lost the seat and all the assembly because of what they did before the election. So the parties should actually do what is right so that they don't end up winning elections only for them to be taken out on technicalities. So what I will advise the parties to do is to be able to play according to the rules, so that even if in the end, because you cannot stop all these litigations, that's why we have the courts. The courts are there to handle all the litigations. So if the courts decide in your favor, you are ready for it because you have followed the dictates of the law. But if you somehow fail to do that, then you can only blame yourself in the end.
Okay, let's move on to, academics. Yesterday was Teachers' Day, and, teachers were celebrated all around the world. Would like for you to share your thoughts on the ASUU government, crisis, and the fact that, a new faction of, lecturers has actually been registered. That's CONUA, and they're actually telling these lecturers to actually go back to the classroom. A lot of people have a lot to say about, this particular faction. What's your thought on that?
Well, the faction you are talking about, people will ask. They were registered like 2-3 days ago. And then you're already talking about who are the members. That's what people want to know. Who are your members that you are even directing to
go back to the
actually go back to school, to the classroom? And then the government itself, why do you have to register, a factional group at this time when you are still trying to reconcile with ASUU? Like the former ASUU president and former INEC chairman, Professor Jega said, this is, a recipe for disaster. If you allow this to happen, then honestly, you cannot say, what will be the end result, because we have seen this a number of times. When the government tried to break the NLC, I'm not talking about even the TUC NLC thing. No, I'm talking about, you remember there was a time that we had, UNLC or ULC or something like that. You know, factionalizing the workers, well, you may get your way maybe in the immediate, but in the long run, honestly, you can only have yourself to blame, because how can you now be able to like get the teachers on the same on board, you know, to do so many things? Because once you begin to have some struggle between the factions, because it will come, it will certainly come. Once you begin to have these struggles, then you cannot make any headway, because one, when you are like in the good books of one, the other one will want to get your attention, and then in the end you will end up not accomplishing anything. So like Jega said, I also believe the timing is wrong, you know, of the registration. And then of course associations are supposed to be free. People should join them voluntarily without being forced or anything. But for you to now like bring it at this particular time, honestly, it leaves much to be desired. And the teachers you are talking about, you know, not long ago the president told us that they have arranged, you know, a better package for teachers. Where is it? It has not been implemented. So why even like raise the hope of teachers? You know, when things happen like this, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody is already thinking of like maybe moving away from the present house that he owns, you know, thinking that something big is actually coming, and then only for his hopes to be dashed. Honestly, it's not a good thing. The way we treat our teachers here, you know, despite the fact that they play a very significant role in what happens, you know, with regards to our development as a nation, it's quite unfortunate.
All right, well, still circling back to the FG-ASUU standoff, we have seen in some of the dailies talk about the appeal court telling both parties to sort themselves out within 48 hours and all that. How bad is this going into an election year if we allow this strike to linger, and we go into an election year with so many youth at home, idle? How bad is that for our polity?
It's very bad. You know, when you don't engage people, then that's when you don't engage them positively. You know, then some people may try to do that in a negative way. And, you know, now that they don't have anything doing, the politicians, all the mischief makers now have like ready tools to use, you know, to cause trouble during elections. So what I think the government needs to do is to find a way of resolving this issue once and for all. Like the Court of Appeal said, if you look at, you know, what they said in that order, asking two parties to go and settle out of court, you will understand that, you know, this is something you cannot actually handle through litigation alone. You know, there are certain things that you need to do, because this will be like voluntary, you know, something you should be able to convince the other party why they need to understand your own position, and then so that in the end you come up with like, you reach a common ground and then proceed from there. Because right now we are not like making any progress, despite what the court is saying. I don't see them handling resolving this in the next even 48 hours, because you don't go to like reconciliation with a clenched fist. You know, all of them right now are stating their positions without moving an inch, and that's not good for negotiation.
Okay, let's have your thoughts on, you know, the flooding. This year has been, you know, something else compared to previous years. And, you know, especially a lot of states, especially in northern Nigeria, has actually been hit by flooding. And you have Kogi being, you know, one of the worst hit by flooding. And the likes of Kebbi, Kaduna, Taraba, Lagos, and others as well. And NIMET is still warning of more flood and asking those with houses close to the riverbank to, you know, leave the riverbank. But but how can they actually do that? Where will they go to from there? You know, just share your thoughts on it and what you think the government can actually do to, you know, make the lives of people, you know, in such communities or states, you know, a lot more safer.
I actually blame the government, you know, for all the disasters, you know, that we are having with regards to flood, because, you know, people are building houses, you know, without any form of regulation. And some of the areas where you see residential houses at the moment, believe me, they are rivers. You know, they are just like maybe after receding for some time, people now find it convenient to go and build there because maybe the river has not been overflowing and things like that. See what is happening in Lokoja. See what happened in Jigawa State, in Hadeja in particular. You know, so many farms washed away, you know, people displaced. So the government will now start coming with relief items. And then even the relief items that they will start coming, you know, it's about who will get the contract to do that so that somebody will be living off the misfortune of others. So I blame the government for all this. We need to know where people are building. There should be approval. If you don't have the approval, don't start building there, because right now, like I said, people are just practically constructing their houses on waterways, which is quite sad.
All right. Let's move slightly away from that and talk about something else that actually broke yesterday. The Senate appropriation bill has actually been talked about. The Federal Executive Council actually looked at it, and it's going to be presented to the joint houses of assembly by the president on Friday. The figures now: 3.6 trillion naira approved for petroleum subsidy. We're still talking about that, and 8.4 trillion borrowing plan for 2023. What's your thoughts?
I don't know even where the government is actually going to get the money from. But it's quite sad at this particular time to say that despite all the things we hear about subsidy being paid, subsidies, this and that, right now there is, if you go to the filling stations, the queues are back. So what actually are we saying? Have we resolved to just allow the market forces to determine, you know, what happens to the price of petrol? Or are we still insisting that we need to control the prices and then be able to pay the balance? Because right now, we are only helping some people. Those who are like in the chain of the supply and what have you are actually the ones getting all this subsidy. The people are not actually getting it. If we go if you travel on Nigerian roads, you know they are still bad, and you still pay something out of the fuel price, the fuel money that you spend, because there is something that you remove. The government is removing actually for the maintenance of roads. When they removed the toll plazas, that's what they did. You know, they found a way of inserting certain things into the price of petrol. And then you are not talking about this amount. Consider what you can do with 3.6 trillion in a country like Nigeria. You know, it's huge, but just few people will get to benefit from this when the majority, you know, keep having problems, despite the fact that the government is claiming to be spending money. Honestly, we need to change the way we do our things. Even the Senate that is actually coming to say, or finding fault in some of the proposals, they should stand their feet. That's why they are there. You know, if you don't believe something is in the interest of Nigeria, stop it. That's why you are there. You are not there to like, you know, dance to the tune of the executive. That's why we have separation of powers. You all have a role to play. Play your own and allow them to play their own. But like I told you earlier, the problem with Nigerians, we don't want to be in the bad books of those in authority, because we think they hold the A's and then they can maybe help us or like deny us some roads in particular ways. I think we need to change the way we do things.
Yeah, that's the mindset of Nigerians or politicians.
The politicians.
Exactly.
Okay, so what about the $73 per barrel, oil price that has been approved by Senate? What does this mean for Nigeria?
I think it's a wishful thinking, because even if we get that, right now we are not saving anything. Because the money that we'll be making, supposing maybe we have, in the end, we end up with maybe $50 per barrel, then, $70, $100 per barrel, then we now have like 23 or $27, that we can actually save. But those things that we will be saving will now be going back to the payment of subsidy. So we wouldn't be making any headway using this. Honestly, I don't think just having $73 per barrel will help us. What we need to do is to make sure that our refineries are back on stream. They are actually working. We are spending less, to import finished petroleum products. If we are able to do that, then we will be able to save some money. But right now, even if we are able to make dollars, we'll use the same dollars in settling things like subsidy when we have so many things that are actually begging for attention.
Are you even talking about the refineries now?
Well, the government is saying that they're actually coming up with timelines that by so time, why are you still spending money? We have the Dangote refinery actually coming on stream anytime soon. But I think even the reason why he's delaying that is because we are still yet to sort out so many things in the petroleum industry. Because right now, you don't know whether the subsidy is there, whether the subsidy will go. You don't know what the government is, what you will be coming out to put in the market. Luckily for him, even where he's situated is ready for international market. So he wouldn't bother much about what is happening to Nigeria. But the snag is the fact that the NNPC, is a stakeholder in the Dangote refinery. The government has some stake, even if it is little, at least they have some stake. And then they also have this right of first refusal. They have to be the ones to supply you with the crude, so many things that will happen to their advantage. So if you have things like that, because the private way is to go. Public institutions have not, shown to be capable of doing so many things. So honestly, we should start thinking of the way the private sector can come in so that we handle all these issues once and for all.
All right, let's quickly take a look at one more story before we go. Now, the lead story on the Guardian newspaper talks about, how regulation and policy frustrates 14,120 megawatts hydropower. Now we've seen, how the Mambila Power Project, was frustrated as well. Can you share your thoughts on this? And, do we see an end to, lack of power in Nigeria very soon?
I don't think we'll be able to accomplish much with the current arrangement, TCN will say we are releasing power, and then the discourse are not accessing it because probably they don't have the capacity to take all this. When people are actually complaining of lack of power in their areas, like, I don't know in your own area, but this right from maybe sometime around 3 or so, the lights went off. They're still not back. So we still need the power, but then the government is not acting as if it is also interested in making that a reality. So, and without power, there is little we can do, especially when you talk about all these small and medium scale enterprises, because how do you expect, like, the barber now to be able to do his business without electricity? We have tailors, we have so many that are on the lower rungs of the society. And then the government is not doing anything, despite the fact that with all these businesses, we are saving ourselves lots of trouble, because if these people are not engaged, then they will start thinking of mischief and other ways they will be able to make, to live, off the people.
Definitely, power is very, very fundamental to our economic development, and well, we hope to get it right. Nasrullah, thank you very much for coming on the show, and we did, as usual, as always, we enjoyed all those insights there and quite eye-opening.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, it's still a daybreak on Trust TV. We'll take a short break, and when we return at the top of the hour, the show continues. Still stay with us.
But in a situation where you find that look at the
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that